Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Enoch Entry, and I am a professor of leadership and management. Today, we're going to talk about a very important topic, which is fixing political leadership corruption in Africa. And I want you to join me via enoch.entry, Facebook/enoch.entry.33. So you can join me and let's talk about fixing political leadership corruption in Africa. I want you to share this video. Those of you who will be sharing, I really appreciate that because it is high time we learn in Africa. The entertainments are okay, watching soccer is okay, but we also have to learn a lot in Africa. I want to start, let me see those who are online because I know a lot of people will be online. Get your questions ready. And we'll be talking about fixing political leadership corruption in Africa. Again, my name is Dr. Enoch Opoku Entry, and my YouTube is Leadership Talk with Dr. E. Leadership Talk with Dr. E. So I want to start by quoting two important heroes in Africa. Corruption is very important, and how do we fix it in Africa? It's very important. I want to quote two important heroes in Africa. And the first one is Chinua Achebe. Chinua Achebe said that the trouble with Africa is simply and squarely a failure of leadership. There is nothing basically wrong with the African character. There is nothing wrong with the African land or climate or water or air or anything else. The African problem is the unwillingness or inability of its leaders to rise to the responsibility, to the challenge of personal examples, which are hallmarks of a good leader. So Chinua Achebe placed the entire problem of Africa on the doorsteps of leaders who are not leading exemplary life for the others to follow. Then Nelson Mandela also talked about African leadership this way. He said, Africa is beyond the mourning the past of its problems. The task of undoing that past is on the shoulders of African leaders themselves, with the support of those willing to join in a continental renewal. We have a new generation of leaders who know that Africa must rise to that responsibility of taking its own destiny in its own hands, and that Africa will uplift itself only by its own efforts in partnership with those who wish her well. So Mandela is also saying that the responsibility of changing Africa lies on the shoulders of Africans with other countries who are willing to partner or wish Africa well. So these two heroes in Africa that I have talked about, Chinua Achebe and Nelson Mandela, leadership was very important to them and corruption was also very important to them. I have seen people giving their comments already. Please share this video and let's learn about how to fix political leadership corruption in Africa. So let me start it this way. Political pundits have access to language. We all know that Africa is dominated by two or one main political parties. And these political parties have access to language and actions. But the good news is that they don't have access to our individual thoughts. And because they have access to language and actions, it often leads to superficial and mistaken analysis on our radio and TV stations. Now, let me explain this. According to cognitive and brain sciences, most thoughts, as much as 98%, is unconscious. 98% of our thoughts are unconscious. And that means there's a lot going on in our brains that we don't have direct access to. But what is hidden from us determines a great deal of what makes sense to us and how we reason. So according to cognitive science, we have just 2% of our consciousness. 98% is our unconscious biases. And unfortunately, the 98% that is hidden from us is what makes sense to us or what doesn't make sense to us. And that is why we see a lot of debates and insult on radio and TV stations. So let's see how we can deal with what is hidden from us. I'm going to begin with democracy. And democracy depends on citizens caring about each other and taking responsibility for both themselves and for others. I repeat again, democracy is no more government of the people, by the people, and for the people, as defined by Abraham Lincoln. But it depends on citizens caring about each other and taking responsibility for themselves and for others. This yields a moral mission, and the moral mission of democracy is to protect and empower all citizens equally. So the mechanism to do this is through what we call the public. It is a good public system that a good private system can build on. So let's see it this way. If we have a good public life, which includes good roads, good bridges, good education system, good healthcare system, good communication system, good court system, good military, good police, fair judicial system, clean water, clean air, safe food, and the parks of recreation. When these public goods are built well, then the private system can build on this good public system. Very important. Very, very important. Unless we have a good public system, we can never build a good private system. So public roads, bridges, police system, our parks, good food, air, water, all these things, when these public goods are provided in good quality, then the private sector can build on that. I understand that we all differ in values and modes of reason. But today, let's learn together. And your comments, I'll be reading them because that is very important to me. All of us have messages to tell about corruption and how we can fix it in Africa. But I'm going to open your eyes to the reason of science, empirical evidence, that talks about why we're crawling in corruption and how we can get out of it. Last 2 weeks, I talked about a whole lot of things. And I indicated that education has always been part of every solution. If you go to my YouTube website, Leadership Talk with Dr. E, you would know I've talked about the racism going on in America. I've also talked about power and influence. And you can just go and then listen to some of these things. I need you to empower my hands so that we can fix Africa. I want to also state emphatically that if you are a black person, it doesn't matter where you live. You can live in Haiti, you can live in Jamaica, you can live in Dominican Republic, you can live in Trinidad and Tobago, you are an African. Any black person is rooted in Africa, whether you know it or not. I went to Trinidad and Tobago and everybody there is a Ghanaian. Go to Trinidad and Tobago, they all know they are Ghanaians. So wherever you are, wherever you find yourself, if you're a black person, you are an African. And the time has come for us to face our own problems. The time has come for us to face our own problems. I've seen people who are also trying to publicize their own things, whatever they are doing. That's great. I really go for it. So 2 things that defines who a country is: the values and policies. The values and policies. When we talk about values, we're talking about caring for each other and building and protecting our communities. That is the values. And then we talk about the policies. Policies that provide jobs, enlighten the people through civic education. Policies that dignify people's life by giving them food, clothing, and shelter. And policies that respect all citizens. So note these 2 things: values and policies. And in each country that you go, if you come to America, Republicans espouse values. They talk about values, whatever values they think that they can give to Americans. And that is why they win most elections, because values trumps policies, unless you know the language of policies and how to use it well. And that is why Democrats struggle a lot when it comes to winning elections. So it's all about policies and values. Any political party will go for either of them. Either you go for values of the country or you go for the policies. But if you want to go for the policies, then you have to know the language that people of discerning minds can understand how policies also work. That is important. Now, let me come back to African leadership corruption and how we can fix them. every political leader seems interested in leaving his or her mark of power. So every political leader, when they come to power, they want to leave their mark out there so that people remember them for doing A or B. But in doing that, there are some key words we have to look for. Good governance. Good governance. If you want to leave your mark as a leader, think about this concept of good governance. I will define what good governance means by a guy called Oyala. Now, after good governance, think about the moral product you are leaving for the people. So I am picking very key important words. If you are a leader in Africa and you want to leave a good legacy, that when you leave, people remember you, the first thing is good governance. Think about good governance. And by the end of this video, I will define what good governance is. Then think about the moral product that you are leaving for the people. Is it humility? Is it empathy? Is it not being late? Time consciousness? What value are you leaving for the people? Is it discipline? So think about the moral values that you are leaving for the people. And then inclusive decisions. When you make a decision, do you include all stakeholders? That is also a key component of a good leader. And then do you elicit actions that enhance trust of the people? So 4 key words that are important for every political leader: good governance, moral product, inclusive decision making, and then building trust among your people. Now in Africa, corruption is a manifestation of lack of good governance. So remember how I started, that good governance is a key word in leadership. And if you are corrupt, that means that you left a bad governance, not a good governance. So in Africa, corruption has always been a manifestation of bad governance. And I want to read some of the research because I believe in empirical evidence. I am a professor of leadership and management. I talk about what I know, what the science say. I will take you to how science works. We can all sit at radio stations and TV stations and talk about many issues. But I can tell you that what does the science say? Show the facts. So these are some of the facts. According to research by a guy called Sanko in 2009, one by Graham in 2003, Transparency International in 2012, Levine in 1975, Jima Bwedi in 2002, Cyril Dadia in 2009, corruption has remained a constant problem in Africa since the 1960s, where the majority of the countries gained independence from the British. So all the research directs to the fact that corruption began with Africa right after independence. What happened? I believe that Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, Kenyans call him Mzee. Jomo Kenyatta, we're talking about Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, we're talking about Nyerere and the others who gained independence for Africa. They meant very well for that continent. Some of them stood outside the country. They meant very well for the continent. And they came thinking that the ideas they have learned from the West, they are going to implement it in Africa. But what happened? They got choked by corruption. They got choked by corruption. In fact, if you go to Kenya right now, the Kikuyus, which is the tribe of Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, now his son, Uhuru Kenyatta, is the current president. They own almost half of the land of Kenya. Grabbing power, grabbing resources. We talk about that. That has corrupted Africa to this time. Now, some of you don't want to hear a lot of things about Africa, but look, what we don't want to know about ourselves is also part of us. There are many things we don't want to know about Africa, but that is who we are. It's just like an individual. There are many things you don't want to hear about people telling you you are A or B, but that is also part of you. So what are our values and what are our policies? We are currently 54 countries in Africa, and we have 1.3 billion population, according to World Meter, that tracks citizens every day. Out of this 1.3 billion population, the world population now is about 7.7 billion. So African population is about 17% of the world population. Great. But guess what? We consume less than 1% of the world resources. America is just 4 to 5% of the world population, but Americans consume 20% of the world resources, 4 times what happened. Let's look at our land area. If you look at the African land area, which is 11.73 million miles square, only Asia is more than Africa because Asia land area is 17.21 miles square. If you combine Europe and America and Australia, African land in area is bigger than that. So the whole Africa can swallow America, Europe, and Australia. 3 different continents. And the belly of resources in our lands. What happened? The belly of resources in our land. What happened? So let's talk about a couple of things. A charge of corruption and the practice of good governance. A charge of corruption and the practice of good governance. The word is that they are antithetical. Antithetical. When we say something is antithetical, that means they are directly opposed. If you have good governance, then you cannot be tagged with corruption. And the opposite is also true. If your governance is full of scandals, it means that you are not eliciting good governance. So good governance is opposed to corruption. And any governance that has been tagged with corruption, that means you have a problem with good governance. These 2 words are very important. So that means if your government is accused of corruption, then your governance is poor. So what is governance? What is governance? Governance is the manner in which power and authority are acquired, organized, and exercised, as well as returned between the people and those who hold power. So how did you earn power and authority in your country? Did you come by fair means or through coup d'etat? Did you steal the ballots to win the elections? Now, if you came to power genuinely, and then you exercise that power so that people can benefit from your sense of rule or powerness, it means that you exercised good governance. Now, 2 things that I want to point out. The World Bank in 1992 said that the economic failure of Africa is due to the crisis of governance. And this is why governance is important. The World Bank says that all the economic failures in Africa is due to bad governance. Then according to a researcher, his name is Noor, N-O-O-R. He came with this research in 2008. He said that poverty in Africa is due to corruption and bad governance. He combined the 2. So let's define corruption, what it is. And after 30 minutes, I'll open the line for all of you. I'll be reading your comments and I'll be answering them. I just want to build a case for what I'm talking about before I will begin to discuss that. In fact, for me, learning is give and take. Teaching is just a higher form of learning. I want you to contribute so that we all share ideas. That is very important to me. Let's define corruption. According to Welling in 1973, corruption is the use of public office for private gain. Anybody who uses a public office for private gain is absolutely corrupt. So think about positions that you find yourself. It's not just political leaders alone. Anybody who works as a civil servant. If you have taken money or influence from somebody to do something for them, you are corrupt. So another researcher, his name is Inye, N-Y-E. He came with this research in 1989. And he talked about corruption is a deviation from the normal duties of public service. And it's connected to private material or status gains. Anytime you are in a public office and you want to gain a status or you want to gain something private from your position, you are corrupt. I want to share a story with you with a friend of mine, Dr. Boyd Johnson. He was the director of the doctoral program at Indiana Wesleyan University, where I had my PhD. Now, Dr. Johnson went to Tanzania to do a research. And before he went there, he wrote a letter to the minister one minister, his jurisdiction is where he was going to conduct the research on corruption. When he went there, he went to the office of this public servant who is the minister. He said that, I am Dr. Boyd Johnson. I'm from America. I wrote a letter that I want to come here and do research on corruption. He said the guy went to a file, a stack file, and that file was about 100. It's like about 100 stack file. He flipped, go to the last end of it, and that was Dr. Boyd Johnson's letter. He shoveled it, the dust out of it. Brother said, I found your letter. What did you say I can do for you? And he said, I want to do some research on corruption in Tanzania. He said, well, I can go to this place, talk to the people. The man spent the whole day leading Dr. Boyd Johnson to learn about corruption, existence or not, in his country. When he finished, Dr. Johnson gave him $100 and said, my friend, I have taken you a whole day and I could not take you to lunch. Can you take this for lunch? And the man said, no, I can't take it. I will never take this money. It's my duty as a public servant to help you bring the best in our country. He did not take the $100. So Dr. Johnson told me that he was really surprised because when he left, he was thinking that when you give people who are public servant money, they will take it. But this man proved him wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, my friends, this is what we're looking for in Africa. People who would never take money for public service. People who think that I'm here to serve and I'm not here for any private gain for what I do. So Transparency International, they also compile Corruption Perception Index, and they started from 1985. They define corruption that it violates the rules of public service, and people have private political influences for private monetary and status gains. So you can see that the definition, we have many words in similar. Anybody who is seeking for private gain for public service is corrupt. So what is our premise here for this argument? Private political influences and gains hurt everyone who depends on the integrity of the people in the position of trust. Anytime you've been put in a position of trust and you want to gain private things for yourself, you destroy the integrity of the people. Think about that. So from Inye's definition, three things that comes out. If you are corrupt, these things that we see, bribery. And when we talk about bribery, it's the use of rewards to pervert the judgment of a person in a position of trust. People who are in position of trust, when we give them some rewards, it could be money, it could be influence, it could be anything. That is corruption. Then nepotism. Nepotism, the official definition is the bestower of patronage by reason of ascriptive relationship rather than marriage. Square pegs in round holes. Nepotism. So we hire people based on classmates, churchmates, where we come from, they are from our own village or even from our own tribe. That is nepotism, and that is corruption. The third one is misappropriation. And misappropriation is illegal appropriation of public resources. Illegal appropriation of public resources. Here I'm talking about land, money, cars, contract. Anything that is illegally applied, that is corruption. So if you are a public servant and a driver of your organization is driving your wife, that is corruption. If you are the director or the minister and you don't have a relationship with your deputies and the other people who work with you, and you try to bring them down so that you will shine, you are corrupt. It's misappropriation. So misappropriation entails a lot of things. And they all boil down to one thing: personal gain. You are trying to gain a status higher than all the others, or you are trying to gain money or resources higher than the others, and that constitutes corruption. I've already stated that all the research shows that Africans blame corruption on their political leaders. We'll take another time to talk about religion, because before the white man brought religion into Africa, we have what we call spirituality. And I'll take some time to talk about that one day. So let's see the literature. African Union, many people have bashed at the African Union. What are they doing in many conflicts? And the African Union are saying that they are calling for more transparency and accountability and admit that Africa needs to do more in corruption. So the entire African Union is saying that, yes, we admit that Africa is corrupt and we need to do more. So what is the African Union doing? And what are all the presidents of the 54 African countries are also doing? According to African Union report that came out in 1998, more than $148 billion is lost to corruption in Africa every year. $148 billion is lost to corruption in Africa every year. And the World Bank also anticipates that corrupt public officials in Africa receive $20 to $40 billion in bribes annually. So the World Bank are also saying that public servants in Africa receive 20 to 40 billion. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take these figures and think about them. 20 to 40 billion dollars is received in Africa that goes to individual pockets. And that is really dangerous for our development. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Transparency International. I indicated that from 1985, they've been tabulating the most corrupt countries in the world. And there are many indicators that I will talk about some of them and what they are looking for. We have many local chapters of Transparency International in most African countries. And they are also fighting this kind of corruption. So according to the current one, I'm going to pick the 2019 CPI scores, the Corruption Perception Index scores. As they do every year, they will list 180 countries in the world. We have over 186 countries in the world, but some of these countries, they don't have a lot of indicators that you can use to judge perception corruption index. But out of these 180 countries, we always have most of the Scandinavian countries, Denmark, Norway at the top with a score of 87 out of 100. So the yardstick of Transparency International judging a country that is corrupt or not is that if your score from all the indicators that they use in judging whether a country is corrupt or not is less than 50, then you are corrupt. And I can tell you that from 1985, not many African countries have scored more than 50. In fact, if you look at the dead end of most of these, you find all the African countries, what they call the last 25 percentile. You find a lot of African countries like South Sudan and Somalia out there. Ghana has always been in the 80th position with a score of 41. So we've been hobbling around 43 and 41 scores. Remember, the yardstick is that if you don't get a score of 50 out of 100, you are corrupt. And so far, African countries that have done well is Seychelles. Seychelles have really done well. They have been in the 27th position recently. That's a good thing. But remember, the population of that country is 98,000 people. We also have Cape Verde that have really done well, and they have been in the 58th position, really impressive. But Cape Verde population is 550,000 people. We've also seen Botswana doing well with 61 out of 100. Great score. Cape Verde had 58, 66 score for Seychelles. Rwanda had 53, Mauritius had 56, and Namibia also had 56. So these African countries are doing well. The rest, we've seen a lot of corruption, and we need to work hard on that. I will begin to take some of your comments and then begin to read them, because that is going to help me to know what you guys think. I have Kajo saying that all corruption is important to learn. Yes, we all learning, and it's very important for us to learn. So let's see some of my recommendations how we can face corruption in Africa. The first one is we have to manage conflict of influence. Managing conflict of influence. Government should reduce the risk of undue influence in policy making by tightening controls over financial and other interests. Government should not have interests and control over finances in the country. In fact, we should make the private sector really works. Anytime in the procurement process, anytime in the contract process, government have so much interest, then corruption begins to set in. And here I'm talking about revolving doors, where there's what we call the reciprocated privileges. Laws are made to benefit some of these businesses so that they can do well, and other business also loses. These are some of the areas we should look at in fixing corruption. And then we also have to make sure that rules are properly enforced and sanctioned. Yes, Africa have got some of the best rules and regulations. How do we enforce them? Enforcement has always been a challenge. We have to look at that situation. Then we need to control political financing, because anytime we allow a lot of people to contribute money to political campaign, it really influences these politicians. We need to strengthen our electoral integrity. I've seen a lot of debates about new voter register or not in Ghana, and a whole lot of debates have gone on. That's not what I'm going to talk about today, unless somebody brings the issue out, and I'll tell you what I think about the whole issue. But we also need to strengthen our electoral integrity. Elections must be free and fair, and we have to avoid vote buying. Here, I will implore on the citizens that don't take money for any politician who want to win power. If the person wants to serve, they are not supposed to pay to be serving. They are supposed to tell you what they can do for you so that you vote for them. If somebody pays you into political office, that person has already corrupted you. So don't go for it. And then we also have to look at how to regulate lobbying activities. We need to promote meaningful access to decision making and consult all stakeholders. So any African country and leaders that want to bring any policies or values, they have to consult all stakeholders. It really helps a lot. And then we have to tackle preferential treatment, service delivery. How do we treat other people? Do other citizens of the country have better roads than others? Do other citizens of the country have better access to potable water than the others? All these things, we should look at them because it shows how we are caring for all citizens of the land. Then we also need to empower citizens. We need to protect civil liberties and political rights. We need to protect civil liberties and political rights. And here I'm talking about freedom of speech, expression, and association. We need to engage civil societies in any policies that we bring. We need to protect the citizens against crime. Crime is really high, and crime comes from corruption. We need to protect our citizens, really very important. And then we need to protect activists. We have a lot of think tanks in Africa that are really on the neck of these political leaders to do things right. We need to recommend them. And then protect these activists because they are helping our country to grow and be a better one. We need to also protect whistleblowers, people who give us inside information about wrongs that are going on in our societies. We don't have to expose them, but we need to protect them and make sure that, and make sure that they are protected because whistleblowers are very important in exposing corruption in our societies and communities. We also need to protect journalists. Journalists are the mouthpiece of the people. They are the fourth realm of government. And we need to protect our journalists from politicians. We need to protect them. Very, very important. We also need to make sure that we monitor and expose corruption activities in our area. So look at your neighborhood and see people who are there that you think are doing things that are not right. Call the police and tell them. We, all our citizens, have a part to play in uprooting corruption. What we call the bad apple theory. Bad apples in our society. We have a responsibility of citizens to really expose bad citizens of our society. Because guess what? Corruption also affects your GDP. Your GDP per capita, corruption affects them all. And that is why rich countries are getting gross domestic product of over $49,800 per citizen. And when you come to Africa, Ghana is about $3,300 GDP. And when we talk about, I'm talking about GDP per individual. And then Kenya has 1,800, according to the CIA World Fact Book. So here I'm also citing the source. GDP per capita is what I'm talking about. That is, if you divide your GDP by the citizens of the country, whilst America have about 49,800, Ghana have 3,300, and Kenya have just $1,800. So a couple of other things that we can use to fix our corruption. We have to fix our corrupted traditions. Remember, I began by saying that values are very important in fixing corruption and good governance. What are our values in Africa? Is it humility? Is it empathy? Is it courteousness? Is it service? Is it hospitality? We should define our values so that everybody will go with those values. Because our corruption don't have many values that people can learn from. Yes, traditions are great. And it's good to have a cultural moment that people will perform. But what are the values that are coming from those traditions? Our elders should begin to teach that. Because Africa is one of the continents that the elderly are highly respected. And they should come out with values of our tradition that will really help the people. We also need to fix the low wages of our civil servants. That is very important. I've seen many theories that say that most African civil servants are lowly paid, and that is why they steal money. And the government should look at that. But in looking at that, you also have to think about your productivity. Don't go sit at the office and then be working lotto papers. Be reading newspapers, thinking that that is enough of productivity, and then we should be able to pay you well. So we should be able to look at that. We also have inadequate knowledge of citizens' rights. So National Commission for Civic Education, all the civic education institutions in Africa should rise up and talk about knowledge of citizens' rights. The citizens should know their right and how they can contribute to the growth of Africa. Again, people with faulty moral characters, or what we call the defective human characters, the bad apples, we should fish them out. We call it the black apple theory. Bad apples in our societies, don't be shy to tell about them, because they are not helping us to grow as people. We should also watch government intervention in the private sector. How are governments intervening in the private sector? We should be looking at that. And then here we should look at the social, ethno, and linguistic norms. Our social norms, ethnic norms, and then linguistic norms. I can tell you that tribalism is more dangerous than racism. I repeat again, tribalism is more dangerous than racism. You live in a country where you all look the same, and then one tribe cannot even marry from another tribe. That's a shame. We live in Africa where when people are hiring others for jobs, they look at what tribe is this person coming from. That is a shame. We live in Africa where homophobias are there. Think about what happened in South Africa. Your fellow Africans, killing them. So I want to put on record that tribalism is more dangerous than racism. Because racism, we're comparing two different races. But tribalism is people who look like you and do everything like you, same country. And yet you can't do things together. Why? So we should all eschew tribalism. It's not good. Whatever your tribe, and so what? We are all coming from the same country. We should begin to look at that. Tribalism is really not good for Africa. So some of our cultures that have really divided us, we should be able to look at them and then take that one away. Why are we corrupt? Somebody will ask me that question. Why are we corrupt as Africans? Well, according to World Bank and IMF reports, every year, Africans are corrupt. According to Corruption Perception Index, we are corrupt. According to all the Department of State reports from the embassies that are in our countries, they say we are corrupt. According to the Afrobarometer reports, they say we are corrupt. According to the integrity initiatives in different countries, they say we are corrupt. According to the Revenue Watch Institute, they say we are corrupt. According to the Global Integrity Reports, they say we are corrupt. According to the Heritage Foundation, they say we are corrupt. And according to the Freedom House reports, they say we are corrupt. So how come that everybody's saying we are corrupt and we don't see it? Is it because we think differently? One thing that I've noticed from traveling to most African countries, you can go to Haiti, you can go to, I'm talking about any black country. You can go to Haiti, you can go to Guatemala, you can go to Dominican Republic, you can go to any of the African countries. The buildings are the same. The uncovered gardens are the same. How we arrange our buildings, our market system, the public transport system, everything is the same. It doesn't matter where the person is. The same way if you go to Europe, their buildings and everything, arrangements and planning are the same. Come to America, I'm talking about North America and Canada, it's the same. So you can see that values and planning differ from one continent to the other. And we need to be looking at some of these things and fix them. Again, a lot of people collect bribes, and I know that some countries, especially Tanzania, are working at their airports, that they don't accept bribes in their countries. Immigration officers, custom officers who take money from people before they do things for them. I think here, I recommend most African countries that they are doing well, but we need to do more in fixing it. Now, let's talk about debts that we have. According to the new data that I just found, Angola is indebted to China to a tune of $25 billion. Ethiopia is $13.5 billion. Kenya, $7.9 billion to China alone. Republic of Congo, $7.3 billion. Sudan, $6.4 billion. Zambia, $6 billion. Cameroon, $5.5 billion. Nigeria is $4.8 billion. Ghana, $3.5 billion to China alone. And then Democratic Republic of Congo, $3.4 billion. We have 2 million Chinese citizens in Africa. And guess how many Africans we have in China now? 200,000. So we should be watching out for why a lot of Chinese are now establishing themselves in Africa. I've seen Paul Kagame saying that recently he deported 18 Chinese citizens back home, never to come back. And he told them that we are conscious of colonialism. You can come to our country and obey the laws, but you cannot come, take the laws into your own hands, take our lands and do whatever you want and kill our citizens. We'll never allow that. Ladies and gentlemen, we should be looking at all these things that are really creeping in. Now, I want to talk about another important factor, which is money. What I call the monetized theory. Moneycracy has taken over our politics, political campaigns. But this is the theory. Those who think about money solve problems quickly and simply. Those who think about money solve problems quickly and simply. What it means is that if you take money from somebody, the decisions you make are going to be quick and simple. You will not be thorough. And do you wonder why? When we found oil in Ghana in 2008, and then they had to negotiate about the percentage that the citizens of Ghanaians are going to get, we were given 13.75%. Yes, I repeat it. Professor Kwame is at Texas, that he did that research, and I met him at Indiana. 13.75% is the oil percentage they gave to Ghanaians. They found oil on your land, and you are not even getting 15%. And the reason is simple. Anytime somebody gives you money, you make or solve problems quickly and simply. You are not detailed, you are not thorough. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the problem of Africans. From our leaders to everybody, the citizens, to the cleaner. Anytime somebody gives you money, the decision you make after that is shallow, is quick, is simple. You are not detailed and you are not thorough. So anytime somebody gives you money for a contract, you are not detailed into the contract, you are not thorough about that, the person can go and do any shabby job. Anytime you take money from people, you don't do a good job. And those who want to corrupt us, that is why they begin with giving you money. I'll share an example with you. When I used to work with the German government, I went to Bodada. Is it Bodada? Yeah, Bodada. And then there's a hilly town in the Oti region now called Teteman. So the Chinese were building a reservoir. The Chinese were building a reservoir. And when I went there, they only have one person among the Chinese people who speak English. They call that person Englishman. Now, that guy came to me, seeing that I'm director working for the German Technical Corporation, and I have influence. You know what he said? He went to his room, brought an envelope, a brown envelope with money, and said, "Here, go chop." And I said, "Chop what?" He said, "Yes, go chop." "No, I came to inspect what you're doing. I don't need money." And when the guy realized that I would not take the money, he started shaking. So he took me around. "Well, we have this, we've done that, we've done that." Somebody saying that the network is bad there. Somebody is writing, Kojo says that former President Kufuor reiterated Chinua Achebe's point. Our biggest bane is corruption in our political sphere. Yes, our problem in Africa is corruption. And I think that by the end of this video, some of you will learn how we can fix it. Clifford Owusu Ansan says that the network is bad here. I would like to watch it later. Clifford, yes, watch it later, and you can also share it. AK Mensa says, on point, Prof, especially with the percentage of land owned by the Uhurus in Kenya. Yes, I know Kikuyus own half of the lands in Kenya, and that is why other tribes coming from Rayleigh Odinga's place are always fighting about why have one tribe taken over all our lands. I have this from Nana Kwame Akoa. I say, "Hello, Doc, thanks for sharing your wisdom." Thank you, Nana Kwame. Eduse, Lord Eduse said, "You are on point." Thank you, Lord. He said, "Neo-patrimonialism is a practice that has contributed to the poor development and economic outcomes." Yes, I agree with you, Prof. Lord Eduse. He says, in Ghana, 80% of the land is in the hands of customary traditional authority. And here too, we know chiefs and traditional leaders in Africa, in Ghana especially, who own the land, who have sold it to about 3-4 people. So a chief will sell the land to 3-4-5 people. And most of our traditional leaders are also corrupt. We should not put the blame only on political leaders, but also on traditional leaders. A chief can sell the land to about 3-4 people, the same land. I remember I bought a land at Nyanyano in Kaswa there. And within some few months, I have paid everything, done all the documents. They told me that the chief who signed for me died. There's a new chief who needs more money. If your predecessor sold the land to somebody and the person have documents, now a new chief comes and need more money for somebody who have already bought the land. We need to fix that one too. Anthony Augustine says, "Thanks for your educational enlightened programs." Thank you, Anthony. Yes, Nigeria. I'll talk about Olusegun Obasanjo. He said that democracy is good for Africa because we have over 3,000 different ethnic groups. Nigeria alone have over 325 different ethnic groups. And that is why democracy is important to Africa. It is the only avenue that we can allow other ethnic groups to contribute to our democracy. So, Augustine, thank you for that contributions. Lord Eduse says institutions are also important. Yes, we need to build our institutions and make sure that it works. Obama talked about that. And we need to also make sure that our institutions have the independence to work, especially our judiciary. Lord Eduse says China's debt trap diplomacy is a real threat to Africa. Yes, I've talked about our debt. That is why I picked talking about the debt Africans owe to China. It is a big problem. The Chinese have a philosophy, ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are listening to me. You see that they are now doing what they call the barter system. So they come look at your land that have gold, diamond, bauxite, manganese, and say that we are going to give you this money, 2 billion from Isitophone or whatever, the Chinese banks. You know, most Chinese banks are owned by the Chinese government. They will give you that loan and then use your resources as a collateral that if you are not able to pay the loan, they take that money back. Why are they not giving loans to Europe and America, taking their resources as collateral, but only in Africa? They know Africans cannot pay back. And that is why if you are not able to pay back, they will take that resources from you. They will seize your airport, they will seize your seaport, they will seize your land with gold and diamond and bauxite. I want the youth to be cautious of this. The Chinese are trapping the whole world with debt. They are giving money. America owes China more than any other country. When you owe somebody, you become a debtor to that person. And those of you who have done accounting, a debtor is an asset to the owner. So you'll be working your entire life, working to pay that debt. And we should be careful about how we are borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. If you borrow, we should use the money judiciously for the next generation. Other than that, we'll have a situation where we are trapped in debt. And that debt is going to crash the whole of Africa. Don't think that when you are borrowing, you will go and another president will come over into power and take care of the debt. The debt, the money you are taking, if you are not building good roads, when we build roads in Africa, it doesn't last. Potholes everywhere. When we build bridges, it doesn't last. When we build water system, it doesn't last. We should be able to look at quality of work. Else we are wasting money. We are wasting money. I have this from AK message. Indeed, rent seeking is a major contributory factor to corruption in our land. I agree with you, AK. He also said the whole society, from the very child to the very adult, are chopped, and all of us need to be born all anew. Yes, I'll talk about Singapore, what their president did. He saw the policy. Lee Kuan Yew saw that the older generation were corrupted, and he decided to go with the young ones, educated them. So education of excellence is what he did. Educated the young ones and then trained them to go back and teach their parents the values of the right thing to do. And that is how he was able to transform Singapore. So I have seen that argument that what can we do to make sure that those who are corrupted, the young ones, are not going to be as corrupt as the old people. We can begin from our youth and teach them values. And teach them values that are very important. Very, very important. So all that the Chinese and the Europeans and Americans who come to Africa know is that your customer understands their needs and serve them. So they think that Africans need money. Give him money to go chop. Just get the money. And when we get the money, we are not deep and thorough in the way we analyze situation. We just sign anything. I implore our political leaders. I implore our citizens. I implore our traditional leaders, don't take money before you make any decision. Please, do not take money before you make any decision. It corrupts you. It makes you shallow. Nobody would trust you in doing that. You don't think deep because the money is directing the way you make a decision. Do not. Do not. All right, I'll keep reading your comments. I started by saying that all the leaders of Africa meant well, and they were choked on the way by our own corruption. So I talked about Jomo Kenyatta, Kwame Nkrumah, Nyerere. Some of these people had really great ideas, but unfortunately, along the line, some of them became dictators. The people held them. The people corrupted them. And now we are running in cycles. We are having an ice chest of a whole history. The oldest African country, which is those who gained independence from the British, have not been more than 65 years, except those who are not colonized, like Ethiopia and Liberia. Right from Ghana in 1957 till 1960s, early 60s, Nigeria, Congo, and all those countries. The youngest in Africa has been about 55 years. And we're still talking about the whip masters, colonial masters. Yes, you can have bad parents who gave birth to you. You can have bad parents who did all the wrong to you. But after 55 years of your life, you are old enough to take your destiny into your own hands and drive your own ship of your life. So we should begin to look at ourselves and how we can fix these problems. Again, I say that we should find a way of dealing with tribalism. It is not good. It doesn't help Africa, and we should be able to take it out of our system. I'll be reading your contribution, so please don't forget to make your contribution and share this video too. I want to believe that those who started Africa as the founding fathers put the country on the right path. I finished University of Cape Coast, and I saw that the original plan by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah had an airport at that university, an airport. At that time, most of these leaders had the pace. They needed what they had an idea, a clear idea of what they wanted to do, but they had no base. Again, the leaders that started in Africa had the pace. They were thinking about African Union, bringing Africa together, but they did not have the base. Because at that time, how many graduates were there? And again, I want to recommend most African leaders. For the past 50 to 55 years to 60 years that Africa have gained independence, look at the number of lawyers that we have. Look at the number of doctors that we've been able to produce ourselves. Look at the number of engineers and administrators we've been able to produce ourselves. But with all this knowledge, what have we been able to do for ourselves? There's more corruption even among the educated of how they steal with the pen. If you go to school just to come home and use your knowledge to steal from your poor citizens, then there's something wrong with your mind. There's something absolutely wrong with your mind. Look at the poverty in our land. Somebody want little Gary with sugar. There's not even peanuts, no granite. To eat for a night, they can't afford it. And we have leaders who are sitting in big cars. I'm not saying leaders should not use cars, but think about the citizens you came to serve. Fleet of cars. Fleet of cars. But I've also seen what Paul Kagame is doing in Rwanda, where the first Saturday of every month, everybody will be working. You roll your sleeves and start cleaning the gardens and working, including himself. So there's a new wave of change, and we should learn from African leaders that are doing well. Traditions are great. We are great people. We have great traditions. Africans are proud people. Yes, I'm a proud person. I know. But we should be able to make Africa successful so that all Africans can come home. Because home is where Mama was born. Yes, I know some have traveled outside. Mama has been outside. But before Mama, there was another Mama. There was another grandmama who was born somewhere. And that place is Africa. So all blacks, our origin is Africa. And that is why when Africa thrives, when Africa succeeds, all blacks can hail it. We need Africa to do well. We need Africa to succeed. We need to rid ourselves of corruption and build our country so that there will be model African countries. And that is where we will sit on the discussion table through trade and everything, and the world will respect us. I've already talked about tribalism, that we should eschew it. Make sure that tribalism is killed in Africa. All the in-groups or the out-groups at the workplace, we should make sure that it's gone. Don't go to work looking for somebody who comes from your tribe to make friends with. Don't have a business looking for people who belong to your tribe just to work with. So whether you are an Ewe, don't look for just Ewes, but look for other tribes. If you are an Akan, the same thing. If you are Kikuyu, don't look for only Kikuyus. If you are Yoruba, don't look for only Yorubas. If you are Fulani, don't look for only Fulanis. If you are Zulu, don't look for only Zulus. Look for other tribes. There is beauty in diversity. Beauty in diversity. We all came from different backgrounds. And when we bring our different backgrounds together, all decisions are enriched. And that is why we need to make sure that everybody is contributing to our country. There are other solutions that I want to give to fix corruption in Africa. Delegates need orientations and training. Our delegates, political delegates really need orientation and training on their roles in political leadership. So we find a situation where delegates are really corrupt in Africa. Delegates who appoint political leaders, delegates who elect parliamentarians, very corrupt. In fact, delegates are like the children of these people looking for position of trust, like members of parliament, like presidents. These delegates are looking to get financial gains. They want everything for themselves. They come to these politicians asking for many, many, many things. Because I know some politicians, I don't want to talk about that because somebody will say, they told me. But delegates need orientation and training on their roles in political leadership and governance. We also need effective civic education. We also need transparency frameworks during elections. During elections, the Electoral Commission, whatever they are trying to do, they should be very transparent. Very, very transparent. It is very important for them to be transparent to all citizens. Other than that, there will be chaos and confusion. Professor Ayite has come out with a lot of books. And one thing that I read that I like is that almost 95% of all the wars in Africa have come from election frauds and tribalism. That is why these two key areas are very important. Elections. And anytime there's election, people are sitting on tenterhooks in Africa because they don't know what's going to happen next. All these political parties create tense situations in Africa when there's election, as if they are coming to change everything. But when they come, it's the same story. It's the same story. That is why last 2 weeks I said that no African blood is worth any election, not even a drop. Don't kill yourself for any politician in Africa. If they want to come and do good for us, just quietly go and vote. You have only one vote. When they try to incite one tribe against the other, don't go for it. Because all these tribal wars have been fueled by politicians. And that is why we need to look at our political leaders, people we are taking out there to lead us. We should also have clear policy guidelines that allow stakeholders to monitor the electioneering process. Every stakeholder who have interest. A stakeholder is somebody who have interest in whatever is going on. So when there's an election, every citizen have an interest. And we should allow these citizens to monitor the electioneering process. We should all monitor what is going on. It should not be just the language or the few at the top who are politicians. We should all be able to do our part. And by doing so, we effect change within the political institutions and build positive and trusting relations. And in doing that, we strengthen reputation that could lower political leadership corruption in Africa. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have to know the language we use during elections. Language is very important. Language is very important. Studies have shown that we all dream in our language of birth. I was a manager with Pearson before I became a professor in Cincinnati. And those of you who did nursing, some of you were engineers and medical doctors, you tested with me. I was in charge of 230 different state board testing. You have to pass your state board test before you can practice your profession. And this is what I saw. Any African who comes to write either nursing or engineering course or medical, to be a medical doctor, we have 12 different types of medicine from the American Board of Internal Medicine, ABIM. Anybody who comes to write those tests and that person is an African, they read the question, interpret it into their own language before they answer. Very interesting. We all dream in the language of our mother's tongue. And that is why language is very important. We should be careful about the language we speak to one another. The fact that you are an Igbo and somebody is a Frafra doesn't mean you're better than that person. The fact that you are an Ever and somebody is an Ashanti or the other way doesn't mean you're better than that person. The fact that you are Kikuyu and somebody is a Maasai doesn't mean you're better than that person. The fact that you are Fulani and somebody is not doesn't mean you're better than that person. We should all begin to respect each other. Now, the other thing is that our governments in Africa have resulted in providing free things for the people. We should watch for that, for corruption. Any leader that want to give free things, they cannot account for it. And you see that most of this political leadership corruption is coming from a promise of giving free things. Yeah, some of these free things are good. I like free education, free universal basic education, because education is key in changing every situation of a land. But when everything becomes free, we should be cautious of that. It's not going to help our people. I want to end by saying that we have a huge natural resources base in Africa, but we also don't have knowledge and training to use it. This is our big problem. Where is the knowledge and training to use the resources that we have in Africa? We have bauxite, we have magnesium, we have aluminium, we have gold, we have every natural resources is in the heart, the belly of Africa. But how are we training people with the knowledge to process these natural resources so that we can use them? Recently, there has been cobalt found in Congo DR. It's kind of a green cobalt. And that green cobalt, 60% is found in Congo DR. It is used in making electric batteries. Those of you who live in America and Canada and other places, you can tell that electronic batteries, I'm talking about electric batteries, are now in place. If you go to most of the gas stations, what we call in Africa, petrol stations, you will see places where you can change your electric batteries in your car. So very soon, all the cars that we are using is going to be outdated because electric cars are coming. And that is why you don't have to bank all your hopes in buying cars and all those things, because new ideas keep springing up every day. Michael is saying hello, Dr. Michael Newman Godfrey. Michael, you were late, but you can contribute. You can write whatever point you want to share, because I'm at the tail end. I wanted to do this for 1 hour. It's been 1 hour, 8 minutes. So within the next 5 to 10 minutes, I should be able to wind up reading your comments. And we have to know that we should have a balance between our economic growth and corruption. When corruption is high, it weighs down on the way we grow as a continent. And when corruption is low, we're going to grow, because all the money that I talked about, 20 to 40 billion, that goes to individual pockets. And according to the World Bank, $148 billion that we lose every year as a continent. Think about what $148 billion can do for Africa. It's wasted through corruption. We should find a way of fixing that. Once we do that, I think that everything will be successful for us. So I have come to the end of whatever I want to share with you. I know you will share with others, and I have enjoyed really reading from your comments. Some of you listening, you didn't want to comment, that's fine. But I need you to strengthen my hand. We have to eliminate corruption in Africa. And by so doing, our people will live a dignified life, a life of empowerment, that they can be able to feed themselves, they can be able to have a decent clothing, and they can be able to have a decent shelter for themselves and their families. That is my hope, and I know that is your hope. Let's do this together, and Africa will be great again. Thank you.